Welcome back to the Gut Shot Podcast. I'm Shamsul, Sam, your host. Today, we have back with me, my friend, Syed Akbar.
Good morning.
And we are going to have, as usual, at Gut Shot, very honest conversation. And this is a very honest conversation on the topic of Tahfiz schools. So, before we begin, I would like to thank our audience. We have reached a mark of we have broke the mark of 3,000 subscribers.
Congrats.
Welcome, and thank you so much. We also know that a lot more of you out there are still not subscribed. Please subscribe and get your friends to come together into this Gut Shot community so that we can have a lot of these honest conversations that doesn't happen anywhere else, right? So I think maybe we'll give you a teaser. If we let's target 10,000 subscribers, we plan to do a live event with audience. Let's make that mark and see how fast we can do that before we hit June. Okay, guys? So today, as mentioned, Syed and me are going to talk about and have a very honest conversation with respect to Tahfiz schools. Tahfiz schools, for those who are not aware, I would say, we can define it loosely as being these religious schools that are set up to mainly focus on the memorization of the Quran, and with that also maybe some other religious related subjects. They're not really under the education ministry, but basically the Islamic authorities, under the Islamic authorities to a certain extent, but they are registered Tahfiz schools and they are unregistered Tahfiz schools. So without further ado, Syed, why don't I kick it to you?
Thank you.
And open it up, please.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to reach out or make a comment to our non-Muslim viewers, non-Muslim viewers. This topic, the Tahfiz schools, basically it is not, it's a religious issue and education issue that mainly concerns Malays and Muslims. So it does not really concern non-Muslims. Non-Muslims do not send their children to Tahfiz schools. But there are many issues that have come up in the country pertaining to the Tahfiz education system, which I think could have a bearing. I mean, it will have a bearing on the whole country, on our society. So it may be worthwhile for the non-Muslims also to have a better understanding of what exactly is a Tahfiz school, what the system it belongs to, and what are the issues that, for example, we would like to talk about today. So it does concern all of us. So I hope the non-Muslims will also find this conversation useful, and also our Malay Muslim readers, because remember a few podcasts ago we were discussing Malay problems versus Malaysian problems.
Yes.
There are issues in the Tahfiz system. You can consider it as part of a Malay issue. If you don't want to use the word, problem, it is a Malay issue. But because there are so many people involved, and it's education, it ultimately also becomes a Malaysian problem, a Malaysian issue. So I would like to start by referring to a news article that came out on the 14th of January featuring this person, Tan Sri Alimuddin Muhammad Dom. Tan Sri Alimuddin, right now, he is the Pro-Chancellor of the UPSI, University Pendidikan Sultan Idris, which is based in Tanjung Malim. And he also has the distinction of having been the Director General of Education at one point in his career. So this is a very qualified and very accomplished person, and he knows a lot about education, which is why he's a Pro-Chancellor of UPSI. So he says that the Tahfiz and religious school students, they risk being sidelined from mainstream education system. Okay, there are issues with the Tahfiz because the Tahfiz schools, as you mentioned, they are religious schools. They focus on teaching Quran to the students, mostly the memorization of Quran. Hafiz means a person who has memorized the Quran. So Tahfiz is to memorize the Quran. They focus on recitation and memorization of Quran, and plus other related religious subjects. Sadly, they do not focus on other subjects which other children learn in school. The normal subjects which we learn in school: chemistry, geography, English language, Malay language. So they do not focus on that. So because of that, they are very far removed from the formal education system. Arising from this and the history of the Tahfiz school system, it has always been in the past in this country and in most countries, Islamic countries around the world, it has always been part of a more informal education system. It has got no structure, the discipline is of course the Tahfiz people will say that they have a structure and a discipline system method of learning and conveying knowledge, but compared to the formal education system we have in most countries, what they would say secular system, the differences are great. So there has been a lot of scientific, logical evolution of our modern education system. It has evolved over time. Tahfiz schools follow a system that is more or less like written in stone, unchanging traditional methods, which have not changed for centuries, basically. So which means that they are not up to date with the today's world, especially 21st century, which is what has led Tan Sri Alimuddin Muhammad Dom to say that the Tahfiz school students risk being sidelined from mainstream education system. Before I finish this point, among the things which he said was that there are about 1,500 these kind of religious schools nationwide.
1,500.
1,500. I think the Tan Sri is referring to registered.
Okay.
Those are registered. Registered means again these are debatable, okay, because some Tahfiz are registered with the local religious authority, because religion is a state matter. So the Tahfiz may be registered with maybe the local religious department or JAKIM if it's a federal, KL, whatever. But what does that mean? Do you register a school with the religious department? Do you register a bank with the police station? I mean, what is the link?
I mean, the Islamic banks are not registered with the religious department. It still has to go to bank.
So all these numbers are what does it mean exactly? Yeah. I'm trying to figure it out. Well, what does it mean when you say registered? What does registered mean?
Right.
Okay. So anyway, these are
How many students are we looking at?
The religious institutions, about 1,500, they have about, I think, even the numbers vary, at about 150,000 students total. You also have the unregistered Tahfiz, which runs to about another easily double it up. So total you have about almost 4,000 of these institutions throughout the country, and they may have anything from over 200 to 300,000 students. Again, these numbers are debatable because there's no real exact census, but about 300,000 max, which is a lot of people. Now, out of this number, the point that this Tan Sri Alimuddin has raised is that there's about 79,000 of the Tahfiz students. I think this is an annual figure. Maybe this year, he made the statement in January this year. So I suppose this is an annual figure. 79,000 who will not be sitting for they will not be getting a certification, the SPM certificate,
which is our O levels.
Our O levels, our school living.
Before you go to university.
Before going to university, before life starts, that kind of thing.
Right.
They will not be sitting for this SPM examination because they are not part of the SPM system. They are in the Tahfiz schools. So 79,000 students will not, when they finish their secondary education, they will not have sat for their Sijil Pelajaran Malaysia SPM. So you can't get a job in the civil service if you don't have an SPM. If you don't pass your Bahasa Malaysia SPM, you cannot get a job in the civil service. You cannot even apply for a pilot's license, for pilot training. You cannot go on for further study. So all this is not in the Tahfiz system. Theirs is mostly rote memorization of Quran and other related subjects. They study things like tafsir, some fiqh, they call it, hadith and things like that they study. So they are removed from the formal education system. So
we're looking at this ecosystem about what? From the age of...
Okay, again, all these are dubious and debatable. In our formal education system, the modern education system, we go in Malaysia, we start school at the age of 7 years old. Now it's being lowered to 6. There's some debate about that. We start at the age of 7 years old, what is called standard 1, primary 1, standard 1. You study for 6 years.
Yeah.
Up to standard 6. And then when you are 13 years old, you start form 1 and you go up to form 5 where you are 17 years old. This doesn't apply in the Tahfiz school. Because in the Tahfiz school, although they do follow more or less, the same kind of age categorization, and because if people send their children to a Tahfiz school at the age of 7, that would be standard 1. But in Tahfiz school, anyone can join the school at any time. A 10-year-old kid can join a Tahfiz school for the first time, and he has to start at the lowest rung, you see. So this is like, in when Abraham Lincoln went to school in the old days, they call it a log cabin school.
Mm-hmm.
A log cabin with one room. And in one room, there'll be one teacher, and there'll be students who are like 14 years old, 9 years old, 6 years old, all mixed together.
Mm-hmm.
So because there is no formal intake or formal classification of the structuring of the school in the Tahfiz system, you find that children of different ages can be in the same class. So this is they go by the stage of the advancement or learning in the Tahfiz school, not by the biological age of the child. Although most people would send their children to Tahfiz school just like other parents send their children to the normal school, but there are children who will join the Tahfiz school at different ages in life. So that it's by itself creates issues of pedagogy and things like that.
So if we have, so if we are looking at children at this age, at 7 going to 13, and then going, probably you're looking at secondary education, which we normally finishes around the age of 17 or 18 years old, right? That's their whole young adult life. That's when, if you ask me, formative years, when you are 6 to 13, right? This is when your brain is also rapidly developing and being fine-tuned, especially, if you understand a bit of the biological formation of your frontal lobe, how you think, right? What you think. These are very formative years that we are putting them solely on this kind of for lack of better word, shall we call it log cabin system.
There is very little of STEM. I think what you're trying to, from what I can understand you're saying, there's very little of STEM emphasis. Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and scientific-based education is extremely lacking in the Tahfiz system. Of course, it's a religious system. You cannot mix science with religion, but that is philosophy. That is where things come from. But here we're talking about education. You can have a system where you can teach both or focus on both. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. But before we go there, these are the issues that we are facing. For example, in the Tahfiz system, it is informal. The point I'm trying to make is it's informal. When we go to like the normal school system, the government schooling system, it is very structured. Most parents, I don't know in Malaysia we're required by law, but most parents are required to register their children for school when you...
Yeah, you are.
After 6 years old, you register for the following year's intake. It's like something that is known. Everybody does it from Perlis to Sabah,
And I remember when we were young, your parents would try to register you to where that would be considered in your area or around your city to be the better schools.
Yeah, because the system.
Remember that?
Yeah, the system exists
At that time.
It's a structured system,
Yeah.
I think in our age, in the 60s and even 70s, even until now, the duty of parents is to just register your child in a government school and make sure your child goes to school every morning. Once your child gets into passes the school gate, a system takes over, or the system takes over. There's a structured classroom time. You start school 7:30 in the morning. Each class runs about 40-45 minutes. There are so many periods in a day. There's teachers who come and teach different subjects. There are exact same textbooks which we will be using, over the years. And maybe the covers and the writers and the authors may differ, but it's the same material. Everything has gone through a process of validation, accreditation, and most importantly standardization. So that is a formal schooling system, which about in any country in the world is about the same. This is not available to the Tahfiz students. Now this is major. So now here I'm just talking about the students. I'd like to venture a little bit about the teaching. The teaching. See?
Yeah.
So there is no standardized curriculum in the Tahfiz schools because again it is religion. So they focus a lot on the memorization of the Quran. Fine. There's no exam. You don't take an exam for recitation of the Quran. When the student reaches a certain age, school leaving age, 16 or 17 years old, he doesn't take a written exam. His teacher will examine him, will listen to him reciting, and if the student can recite the entire Quran, then he's considered he has learned the recitation. There's no exam. And then the teacher will also listen to how he pronounces the words. That's it. All right. That's all that is needed. Plus he may study other subjects. So exams are not necessarily a part of the Tahfiz system, whereas exams are a major part of the formal education system. You must take an exam some point in time in school. Of course, now in Malaysia we've been doing away with the exams. Now the argument is coming in to put back more exams, the UPSR and all these kind of things. But so the formal education system, the modern education system, has got a very structured, very well thought out and system that has also evolved and adapted over time. But the Tahfiz does not. You take the teachers, in Malaysia, like in any other country, our education system has evolved for a long time, from before independence, even when the British were here. We've spent a lot of effort on teacher training. In the old days, our teachers used to be sent to England to be trained. I think when I was in school, some of my teachers were trained in England as teachers in a place called Kirby's, famous. And then later we moved teacher training to Malaysia, and we had various teacher training colleges and institutes, and they too have evolved. One of which, the most famous, is UPSI, of which Tan Sri Alimuddin, which I mentioned just now, he's the pro-chancellor. UPSI started off as a teacher training college. They have a very long history, and they have produced maybe tens and hundreds of thousands of teachers. So they are all part of the formal system. Somebody goes to teacher training institute and or college, now university. They can take a diploma 2-3 years. Now they can do a degree, and they are trained teachers. And this is the system that we have to produce teachers. And this means accreditation. There is a system that is accredited how to produce teachers. What is teacher training all about? How much time they should spend in college to learn about teaching, things like that. So that is a system we have had in this country for since before independence. That's more 70 years or more.
We don't have that within the.
You do not have that in the Tahfiz
ecosystem.
So I'd like our viewers, especially our Malay Muslim viewers, to understand this. This is a very informal system that has no standards, either in how you structure students in the classroom, what age at what age should a child be in, at which level of the Tahfiz compared to the normal school. You're talking about the education, the teacher training, the system of producing teachers, and the teaching system, syllabus. our in the normal schools, government schools, the schooling system, the syllabus is standardized. It's been evolved, accredited and evaluated. You do not have a standardized system in the Tahfiz schools. So it is really informal. When you send your children to the Tahfiz system, they are not part of a very structured system at all. It's highly debatable.
Syed, I think if we go back to our own youth, we mentioned before, I don't think we have our religious class in public school, let's say primary school or even secondary school, I think does not even exceed 1 hour per week, if I'm not mistaken. It's probably half an hour twice in a week, and then everything else is towards our national language, English, mathematics, and science, and maybe history, right? When we started off in from the age of 7 to 13, and I think those formative years is, for lack of a better word, that when I look back at it, that's a brainwashing that I went through, right? You went through a brainwashing of actually how to think, even how to think is something that has to be trained. If you put a child in those formative years before the age of 13 and you just gauge the person with memorization, all right, they don't think. It doesn't train you to be a thinker, and you have to be able to challenge or be presented with things that are gonna make your brain curious. I think one of my biggest concern when I hear what you just said is actually then you go further into their next chapter of youth, which is in their teenage years, 13 going down to 18, and in our times, you either take the art stream or the science stream, as they call it. But even the art stream these days, you're basically commerce driven, right? In the science stream, I can speak better on the science stream because I know we were, by that time of my brainwashing of thinking, right?
When you say brainwashing, you mean it in a positive sense.
It's just simply how you're taught to think,
to organize your thoughts,
to be. It is part of the. I mean, somebody said that you give me a child, a child, I will. At the end of the day, I will produce the kind of man that I want, or kind of person that you want, by that period of time, and it is formative years. So by the time I hit about 13 years old, there is a curiosity about the world. We are not internalized into certain books. Actually, the English also opens up the world to us. The science, even for people who don't go into the science stream, the science subject makes you creative, makes you look at the actual world and try to put it together.
The scientific method.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which is you got to test it and then only you believe it.
Yeah.
Right. So
it has to be logic based. There must be some evidence. You are able to criticize questions. That's how we learned a lot of things.
Right. So we are talking about a pipeline. If you look at China, for example, right now, right, getting into the examination, going through the examination in China is actually very, very, very tough. Okay. They have examinations, and here we are. Maybe I'm digressing slightly. Even our education system has stopped testing the students for a while until the last
17 years old, SPM.
Which is, I think, to me personally, is ridiculous because you don't have. It's almost like saying that I'm not going to have a health test for 10 years.
Medical checkup.
Medical checkup for 10 years. And then the next thing I know is actually I've got 3 block arteries. So here we have a situation where kids are going to come out by the time they are 13, they are fully formed in their mind. We talk about the Malay problem and the Malaysian problem, right? There's only certain amount of time in the day, to teach them, to make them understand certain things, and then if they have not enough time to actually structure their thinking or develop their mentality, by the time they go to the secondary school, it's almost too late. So here you are, your other subjects are not there even by the time you hit 17. I'm worried about, let's say, on a yearly basis, let's make a simple assumption, 50 to 100,000 people, like what the
Pro-Chancellor,
the ex-DG was saying, the Pro-Chancellor was saying, 79,000 students
will not be getting any certificate. No SPM certificate.
No SPM certificate.
What's going to happen to them?
Correct. And it actually impacts society as a whole, whether it is Malay society or our whole Malaysian society.
Well, if
this is a problem.
If they don't get basic high school leaving certificate like SPM and they cannot progress very far without such certification, then they are going to become ultimately a burden on society. I can say they will populate the B40s and things like that. If you don't have a good start in life, you're already handicapped, crippled. When you can't even get an SPM certificate, then you will be in the lower rungs of the working classes. Ultimately, you will depend more on the state to help you out, which means a drain on our resources, which can be avoided or could have been avoided if they were able to get their SPM certificates and move on to other things, because they have just about the same qualification as anybody else. But this is a problem. They don't have this chance because the system they come from is an informal system, and also it is very difficult to formalize it, because that's the nature. It is religious education. If I may say, there are some tahfiz, some of them are sizable, but there are very few where they teach both. They teach the memorization of the Quran and religious subjects, plus they also prepare students to take the SPM. There are. It's not totally absent. There are some of them, but not many. A large portion of those tahfiz that are especially unregistered, they don't do this, and they are purely religious subjects, recitation of Quran. But there are very few tahfiz which are slightly larger, more students, well organized. They prepare students for SPM. There's one school in Terengganu which has a dual system of religious education and also preparing students for the SPM. They have done well. They have produced top scorers in the SPM and things like that. But that is few and far between. There is also a government run boarding school system which created a couple of these religious boarding school campuses where they focus on religion, and they also prepare students for the SPM, the O levels and things like that. But in their case, here I'm referring to some research done by one lady in Usim, where this is a research by a lady called Mardiah binti Yahya. She was in College University Islam Antarabangsa Selangor, where because it's a bigger burden on the students when they have to study both the religious subjects, recitation, memorization of the Quran, and also studying for your SPM. They had to school from 7:30 in the morning until 4:30 in the evening, followed by further classes at night, because it's a bigger workload, you see. And ultimately the focus of the school was to make sure that they all get through the SPM, so they focus a lot of time on preparing for the SPM examination, so they pass the SPM. But many of them, half or more, only partially memorize the the Quran. They were not able to memorize. So where does that put them as far as being Hafiz students and Tahfiz students? You only did half the job, but good for them, they got the SPM certificates. So as you say, it depends on how many hours you have in a day. You only have so many hours in a day. If the rest of the world is spending that time studying the things that you talked about, studying the math, the English, the geography, the history, the science, this and all those regular things, within a certain time frame, which suits the pedagogy of the children.
A child's formation.
You cannot tell even a 17-year-old boy, you cannot tell him, okay, you're going to study 12 hours a day or 10 hours a day. It doesn't work that way. You need time for rest. You can only absorb so much within a 1 day's study at school. So we have to keep all this in mind. The moment we start experimenting and deviating, too far from this, the norm, then we are imposing burdens on the students, on the system, on the parents, on the teachers, the whole thing. So it doesn't work very well. The other point is, which you are alluding to, is that we study not only do we study science, we also study humanities in school. We study history, geography, art, literature, all these things. But we study these things in a scientific manner. There is a method of teachers teaching us. There's a method for acquiring knowledge. There's even a method of learning how to draw and to paint. I remember art class. I thought there's nothing to learn in art class until a teacher shows you how to draw a face or all those things. So there's a scientific method. But this is also lacking in the religious education. Like for example, you mentioned when we go into secondary school, we learn things like Newton's laws of motion, all those things. The famous action reaction. I remember that. All those things. When we were 15, 16 years old, we start learning all these things. Newton sat under the apple tree, and the apple fell on his head, and he understood gravity. So these are all scientific principles which we learn, and they have a logic to it. You can appreciate this. I like the action reaction because it's true. For every action, there's an opposite reaction. If you push back on your chair now, you'll move forward. We all know that, you see. So this is all basic physics which we learn. And then you have religious education, which talks about miracles. For example, miracles, things that happen. Miracles, things that you cannot explain by science. Science absolutely cannot justify or explain religious miracles. There are so many miracles. So at one end, you want the children to learn science, to think scientifically, to absorb things like Newton's, the laws of motion, physics, all kinds of stuff. And then in the morning or in the afternoon, you learn something else, which is 180 degrees opposed to what you learn in your science class. There is no laws of motion or Newton's laws of motion in miracles.
Well, there is one, which is
hold on a second. I want to finish the point. So you see, so we are creating this. What do you call this? It's a head-on collision, butting. Like two goats butting heads. On the one side, you learn all the physical principles, the science and everything. Newton's laws of motion, blah blah blah. On the other side, you learn that you don't need all that because miracles can happen, because they happen. That's it now, So to me, that can cause. It's a contradiction in understanding, contradiction in how things work in the real world. Especially when you are taught to believe that both are part of a reality, both are real, both are truths. But one is a religious truth, which we have spoken about before. One is a religious truth which need not have scientific basis. The other one is a scientific truth which must be properly explained with logic and evidence. So children, I feel that children can get slightly confused if
I think we are looking at you live only in a scientific world, actually, to be very frank. Let's put it this way.
The real world.
Yeah. And the real world with this, if you don't start them young to be curious and to be critical, it's going to be a problem when they get to their teenage years. There's only, I really don't understand, because when by the time I got to by the time I got to secondary school, I'm sure you went through. You're an engineer as well. In terms of background, we were taught. In fact, if you ask me, we were taught we got good teachers that went through a certain secular system where the way they teach make you think beyond the textbook, actually, right? So that's part and parcel of it. And we are going into we are halfway through the 21st century, and we are actually embedding a large portion of our population with log cabin education, for lack of a better word, to compete with the rest of the world, not to mention also to compete with the non-Muslims for work. At the end of the day, you're going to see more disparity. I really think, sometimes, what I think, when you mention 13 years old, they go like this. What my thought come just now is, I think children, we should have IQ tests instituted on all students or all children at the age of 13. You know why? Because IQ test is not about knowledge. IQ test is about your ability to think, right? And it is a standard IQ, which is, what they call intelligent quotient, right? These are tests that has nothing to do with what you are actually being taught. You don't have to memorize anything. You go there, you do problem solving, right? So I think for every children at the age of 13, we should actually test their IQ. Because why? Those are how your brain has formed, and you will see where they lack at that particular time. I would be very curious to see IQ tests done on all these Tahfiz students at 13 years old. Seriously curious. Say,
yeah, well, we can have IQ tests throughout the education
throughout
system.
the whole education system and do comparison.
Of course, some people will debate the efficacy of an IQ test, but you could do it as an assessment. I assume the more information and knowledge you acquire as a student in a learning system, your IQ will progress.
Correct.
Because you can think, and
it's about thinking.
It's about thinking.
It's not about what is. We want to see
the ability to think.
Yeah.
Actually, so that's important. But that's the thing. The other issue, before I forget, that. See, this Tahfiz issue now is also politicized.
Yeah, there we go.
You got the 3 R's, right? So this one is 2 R's. It's race and religion.
Right.
Tahfiz is a Malay Muslim issue, and of course religion is very strong. So the politicians get into the act. As far as the politicians are concerned, they see this as a vote bank. That's it. So wherever the wind is blowing from, that's where they will bend, The famous saying in Malay, like the lalang, the lalang grass, it will bend according to the wind. So last year, was it? Yeah, last year, one of our, I don't like mentioning names now, but one of our leaders, he attended a gathering of the Tahfiz students,
Right.
And he told them that they will find means where these Tahfiz students will be accepted at our local universities, government universities. This was on TV. I saw it in the news, which was broadcast in the internet, online media. I saw that a lot of the students couldn't grasp what he was trying to say, which is very sad. But to make this kind of promises is also not very fair on all parties. First of all, the students, if they want to go into university, they will have to go through a system of re-studying and retaking classes and courses to qualify to enter the universities. It's going to take them more time. Or you can lower the barrier, the bar to enter that university. Just call up the government university and say, whatever it is, you must accommodate these students from the Tahfiz who do not have an SPM certificate, who don't have formally recognized education certificates. Find a means of getting them into your campus and put them into some study in course of study. That is going to put a stress on the university authorities, on the university system, basically lower the standards. So the politicians like to make this kind of statements, which do not really solve the problem, maybe create more problems for all parties. There are ways of making sure that the Tahfiz students qualify to go to university. They have to take the SPM papers. It's not a very difficult thing to do. You have to focus. Like I mentioned, there are some Tahfiz schools who offer both the curriculum, the religious curriculum, as well as preparing students to take the SPM and things like that. So we have no choice if we can get the Tahfiz to go along that path, and then you have to be creative in how to get them into this line of thinking. Please don't say that we need an extra few billion allocation in the education budget. You don't need that. It's just a focus. It's how you get the Tahfiz to focus. And it also depends on the parents. So I hope the people who are listening to our podcast today, I hope we are speaking English, so those people who understand English they might be listening to us. But I hope the opinion leaders, our policymakers, people who have an influence in society, they will see this as a real. It is a problem, because when you have 79,000 students who don't have some kind of a SPM certification or anything close, and this is it. This is the last year of their schooling, and they are going.
Those years are not coming back.
What's going to happen to them? According to the professor Tan Sri, there's 79,000 for this year. Next year will be another 79,000. So you're manufacturing all these people with no certification. Where are they going to go? So I hope the Malay Muslim community will listen to our discussion and decide to do something about it. This requires some drastic action, because definitely a problem is being created. These people, their future is going to be it's going to be impacted and severely impacted, and not exactly for the better. There will be one or two or few who will do well. It always happens.
There's always an anomaly.
Those are the outliers.
Outliers, yeah. But we don't live in a world where we do policy for outliers.
No. The large majority will fall through the cracks. So I hope don't leave it to the politicians. I'm telling you, if you leave it to the politicians, the country goes to the rots.
I mean, the problem is actually, if you ask
the community, the society, the Malay society has to open their eyes, have to buck up, and start demanding for the right things to be done. Otherwise, this is, to me, is a disaster. When I read that figure, 79,000 with no certification at the age of 17 years old, that's a disaster.
You ask me not just from that standpoint, but not just on society in terms of burden, but how are we going? How are we going to be able to or get them to have a career, and especially, let's quickly put it this way, lah. I think there must be a rethinking from policymakers and politicians about this Tahfiz school. Period. Let me put it this way, because there's only 24 hours in a day of a child's life. Okay, if you're gonna get them to rote memorize during our days, right? We only have so much limited. I still remember actually during primary school, I think up to primary school, I only went to religious tuition, that was outside of the school system. That's it, just to learn how to read Quran, how to pray. Cukup lah, So that and then it's already tough. For me personally, I remember how tough it was to be able to succeed, to get good grades for the SPM with that many hours. And that reminds me, my own personal experience. Okay, I was a failing student in Form 1. No joke. I was a failing student in Form 1. I put in hours which is actually I did schedule from 4 a.m. when I got up. 4 a.m. I was in a boarding school. I want to get up at 4 a.m. 4 a.m. until I sleep at 11 p.m. I have all my days mapped out. Okay, of studying and actually doing mathematics. I do mathematics an hour in the morning, an hour in the afternoon. I finish all my homework by 3 p.m. after school. And then I have revisions of 2 subjects each side. Okay? And I went from a failing student to a straight A student. And that can only happen because why? I utilize the maximum of my time. And then what happens after that? I realized that when I went to Form 1, actually I realized something happened. When I went to Form 4, by that time, when I went to Form 4, I realized that the technical subject, the STEM subjects become very easy. You know why? I learn how to learn. That's the funny thing, I realized that I learned how to learn, and I understand concepts that actually learning new things becomes so much easier. I didn't have to put in that much effort anymore. So if you take that away from the child at that age, how are they going to compete in this 21st century in an AI world? Syed, I want to add one thing, yeah? I saw these statistics, okay? The e-hailing workforce, okay, in Malaysia is 97.7% Malay. Indian make up 1%, about 1%. Chinese make up about 0.4%.
This is a gig economy also.
This is the gig economy.
It's a gig economy,
right?
Yeah. 97% Malays.
That is a scary number. When you think about it, I guarantee you guys, the robo-taxis are coming in. Okay? It won't be 10 years.
Well, e-hailing and this gig economy, it is also informal economy. It's not a formal economy.
It is not a formal economy. You don't have a permanent job.
No permanent job. No permanent income. No predictable income. No predictable working hours.
The only skill you have is actually driving.
Yeah, from 5 years ago to 5 years later, your skill sets is about the same. You probably know how long the traffic light is in Jalan Bangsa, or how long is the red light in Bangi, that kind of stuff lah. Other than that, you don't learn any other skills.
And then you have proliferation of I've seen on social media, especially among Malay social media, right? What you're seeing is actually a proliferation of this missionary, what we call pendakwah, okay, pendakwah bebas, or this independent missionary teachers, so to speak, right? I mean, this ecosystem is going to collapse on itself. For me, as somebody who's been looking at economics, I think we are looking at an ecosystem that's going to collapse on itself. That's going to be a trouble for the country. I think we have to look at the whole thing and say to ourselves, really, you ask me, why do we need this to happen to our country?
Too late. It's happening.
Right.
We have to.
So we need the leadership.
We have to deal. We have to deal with this. I don't think this Tahfiz. It's a problem lah. It's more of a problem now in terms of output. And if you produce 79,000 high school leavers who have no certification of recognized certification, that's a disaster. So it's a problem, so we have to deal with it. The Tahfiz schools, I think, are going to be around for a while. Actually, the numbers are increasing.
That is a worrying trend, if you ask me.
There are a couple of things that we need to talk about. Is how do we make a silk purse out of the whole thing, and we also need to focus a little bit on why so many people like to send their kids to the Tahfiz schools. Now, among the reasons is, of course, some parents like their children to memorize the Quran and things like that, but they don't realize that they are sacrificing a more formal education, which gives them a better chance in life. They're willing to forego that and send them to a Tahfiz school where they will learn basically memorization of Quran and related subjects.
And you want to compete with Chinese and also the China?
Why do they have this longing for this kind of thing? Because they have certain religious issues and all that. Maybe they are religious beliefs which needs to be addressed. The parents have to be advised, And also, you see, the other thing is that Tahfiz schools, many of them provide board and lodging,
Oh, okay.
You can send your 7-year-old child to a Tahfiz school, and that's it. It's like going to a boarding school, and they're relatively cheap. I have some numbers. A full board and lodging Tahfiz school. It costs anything between about 3,000, 4,000 a year to about some of the other higher end is about maybe 7 or 9,000 ringgit a year. This is relatively cheap. A child can be put in a boarding school. 3 meals are provided, and teaching, learning is provided, and for like 3,000 or 4,000 a year, that's only a few hundred ringgit a month. So you have, we've discussed this in our earlier podcast. We have parents where both the parents are working. They live in an urban environment, and they themselves may be financially stressed, or they don't have sufficient income, and they need to work, so they don't have time to spend on their children, so they send their children to a boarding school or Tahfiz school where the children are under the care of the school, so which frees up time and energy by for the parents to look for an income, to work and get a job and things like that. So there is a reason why the Tahfiz schools, there are reasons why the Tahfiz schools are popular, and these are among some of the reasons. So we have to look at this also.
I mean, when we look at that from that standpoint, I mean, I know people keep telling us in the comments, for example, we should be talking in Malay to get to the majority of population, but we are interested in talking to policymakers. To basically, when we talk like this, we want to convey to the policymaker who understands us very well, right, and the political leaders that look, we've got a problem. You guys, because the leaders are the one, or the people who make policies are the one who's going to be able to change society, right? Normal folks doesn't change society. Let's put it this way. Normal folks does not change societies, okay?
No, only the opinion leaders.
Talking to the majority, frankly, does not change our society, okay? It is the people at the leadership that is going to change a society and make policy changes to society. That's why we speak the way we speak, all right? And even if we were to dumb this down in Malay, we're not going to get it across. Okay? Ladies and gentlemen, please understand why we keep telling you people elect the right political leaders and policy makers to be put in place so that they make the right decisions for society. I mean, you talk about...
I would...
Jeez.
Okay, I would like to just refer a little bit to Singapore.
Yeah.
In Singapore, they have madrasas, which are a higher form of Tahfiz madrasas, but they're only 14, and the Singapore government put a cap on it. They do not allow the creation of any more madrasas.
14 for how many? 5 million people?
Yeah, and they have like 10,000 students, I think, in these 14 madrasas.
Okay.
But in their system, the madrasas they are highly regulated. The government regulates their madrasa system. They have a standardized curriculum for the madrasas where they teach religious subjects and also normal school subjects. They learn the science, chemistry, physics, biology, besides the Quran memorization, all the other religious subjects, the fiqh, the hadith, the tafsir, and all those things. The usul, akidah, all these they learn. Plus regular school subjects. So they insist on that. and they have a centralized examination system for the 14 madrasas in both the religious studies and the normal school studies. And the teachers, most importantly, the teachers in the madrasa system in Singapore, they must have formal qualifications. So there is accreditation and validation across the board of teachers, teacher training, selection of teachers for teacher training, curriculum for teachers training. What the teachers must be formally educated, and then also the syllabus in the school itself. It is accredited, validated, it is updated, things like that. So everything is up to date and at par with modern education system, so that the students who go to the madrasas in Singapore, they get the best of both. So they do that. So because of that, the graduates of the madrasa system in Singapore, they can go on to university, and those who study science subjects, they can become engineers too, or they can become doctors or whatever they wish to. But there is an emphasis on religious education. So Singapore has done this. Well, they can do this because it's a smaller number, but there's no reason why we cannot do the same thing.
And they limit the number.
If I may suggest, we have to be stricter with the Tahfiz. Tahfiz have also been, there's a lot of negative news reports. The fires that frequently happen.
Yeah.
There was the Tahfiz, because they are built, the schools are built especially out in the states and the towns. They don't have proper certification, they don't observe building codes, and there have been more than one case, many cases where fire has happened and students have died. There was one case in 2017 or something where over 20 students and 2 teachers died in a fire, because these Tahfiz schools which we mentioned just now, they're like boarding schools. They take in students are cramped into live in cramped living conditions. 10-20 kids per dormitory room, things like that. Fire hazard. So these fires happen, and then there are deaths and things like that. And then there are other cases of abuse and things like that happening in Tahfiz, in religious schools, which you come out in the media. I don't want to go too much into that, but we have to focus on all these issues where to overcome all these kinds of problems, so that the Tahfiz is more mainstream like the other schools in the country, the formal education system. We have to integrate the Tahfiz closer towards the formal school system. And one of the I would suggest for starters all the operators of these Tahfiz schools, especially in the outside the government system, their operators must have the teacher training certificate. We must insist on that. If you want to operate a Tahfiz school, you may have studied religion, you may have graduated from some Middle Eastern country or the local institution. So the guy, he's a religious teacher, he's qualified to teach religion. Fine, that is you are content expert. You know the religion, but we must insist that they also go for a diploma course in teacher training, like the 2-year 3-year diploma course, where they are trained to become teachers, professional teaching methods, so that then the Tahfiz schools are more in tune or aligned with the scientific method of teaching, of passing knowledge.
I agree with you about certification, about insisting that there must be a proper registration,
standardization. Yeah.
But if you ask me, I'm as you well know, I think my style is always about radical changes. All right. People may seem to think that I'm being idealistic about it. It's not idealistic. It's pragmatic, because if you are a policymaker and if you're gonna pump 100,000 citizens into the job market without being able to compete with other people on real jobs, you are setting your country up for implosion.
Disaster.
Yeah. So as far as I look at it, my recommendation would be every state should have a limited number of registered Tahfiz schools, if there is any at all. Okay, and it must be actually controlled by education ministry, not religious ministry, because education is not a religious function. Okay, the fact that you are teaching a religious subject does not mean it is a religious matter. It is an education matter. All right, the religious ministry or religious authority has no business in teaching. It is an education function. Think about this. I'm sitting here listening to you, and I'm getting very depressed. Seriously, I'll tell you.
Sorry for that.
If anybody look at me while he's talking, I'm getting depressed by the minute. All right, because you think about it. I can teach children at 10 to 12 years old. I can teach, if I want to, and make them curious about the world. Okay, you ask children very simple question like this, because they all know we are all living today, right? If you take a plane from Kuala Lumpur, let's say, to New York lah, all right, via Japan, so that's probably like what, 9, and the plane is traveling at 900 kilometer an hour, cruising speed 900 kilometer an hour. We fly about the same direction as the Earth spinning. And our Earth, for your information, our Earth is spinning at 1,600 kilometer per hour plus, approximately in excess of that, 1,600. You are taking off, and you are cruising at 900 kilometer an hour, the same direction. I will ask the children very simple. Do you know why? How is it that you can catch up to your destination and arrive in New York when the Earth is spinning faster than your plane? Explain that. You know what I just did just now? I just pickled their mind into the Einstein's theory of relativity. I can teach relativity. Can your teachers in all these madrasas pick this kind of curiosity, this kind of critical thinking into your children? Or are you going to let your children come out into the pipeline of the workforce and fail in their lives?
So where did you figure out this theory of relativity? You must tell us.
That's how you read. That's how you, because you got, as I was saying to say it, we got brainwashed when we were young to think critically. All right, to ask questions. And then I started asking this kind of stupid questions, right? Because why? I mean, I was like, how does that work? It doesn't make sense to me, right? It just doesn't make sense. My destination is going faster than my plane, and yet I arrived there. Why? Okay? They don't teach this. If you're memorizing all your life, this is not how you think, So, guys, AI is coming. It's coming now. The world is getting very small and the competition is very, very intense. Do we really want our children to be unprepared to take on the world? That's the question. Say it.
Yeah, so
you have any wrap up to this?
Yeah, everything is relative. Everything is relative. Progress is relative. Wealth is relative. Relative to the guy next door, the person, the next person beside you. Progress is also always, if you think that you are progressing, like running in a race, you think that you are the top of the pack and that you are able to win the race, then suddenly Usain Bolt appears and he just streaks past you, at whatever 9 seconds per 100 meters or whatever. That means you're not paying attention to the real competition in the world. I
don't think you need Usain Bolt. Imagine you bring 200 runners, okay? You have not been running. Your child has not been being trained to run the track, all right? And then you put your child in between all these runners that has been training to run all their life, you guess where
So
he's
you-
gonna be in
so
a
you-
400 meter run?
So you end up standing still. That's what I'm trying to say here.
Yeah, there you go.
You end up standing still. Relative to Hussein Bolt, for example. So
I think the other fellas are gonna lap you.
they're going to come around again. One
Yeah,
more.
they're gonna come around again.
Progress, advancement, wealth, all these achievements, it's all relative. So you cannot be satisfied at any point in time and say, this is it, we have arrived. Cannot. And you certainly should not do things that make you regress.
Yeah.
Regress. So I think this is what is happening in from what we are seeing with this issue of the Tahfiz schools. I cannot forget what the professor man has said, that there are 79,000 students who will not have a SPM certification. That is regressing seriously, because that is your first step, your baby step
To adulthood.
to adulthood, the rest of your life, to developing a career, so many things. You are at the threshold, the first baby step lah. From crawling, you're standing up and taking your first baby step. That is your 17 years old. You have a high school leaving diploma, SPM, things like that. These 79,000 kids will not have it. So, and it looks like this number is going to be there, and it might even increase over the years. So this is a problem. This is a real problem.
The 79,000 number is what, is bigger than the stadium in Malaysia.
So I think we need to focus on this. The Malay community has to focus. It has to be a community issue. Forget about the politicians. They're going to make the problem worse, because politicians, I know them for a long time. If you go alone to meet the politician, they won't give you the time of day. But if there are 79,000 of you, they will start singing and dancing according to your tune, because they're looking for votes. So they will say whatever it is that will make you happy, and they will make wild promises and all kinds of things which doesn't solve problems, because they just want votes. So the politicians, I don't think, are going to solve this problem. It is the community lah. The Malay Muslim community has to wake up and talk about these issues frankly and openly, and start exerting pressure to get real solutions, because it looks like this is going to be an issue for a while. That's my point.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I think we have tried to be as honest as we can be in this conversation with respect to the Tahfiz school in Malaysia. I think if you were to ask me, let me put a cap on this conversation today. I think the situation is unsustainable for the society, and we must be very realistic and pragmatic if we are gonna be able to have our people succeed in this world. Remember, succeed in this world. On that note, thank you so much. Please join us. Don't forget to subscribe and like, and we'll see you again. Take care.
Thank you.